Hello everyone, I'm Dan, and recently I saw a dev forum thread titled The Most Useless Community Resources of 2022. And while it wasn't included on the list itself, there were a lot of responses that said, "Why didn't you include Fusion? Fusion is completely useless, it should be on the list." And you might think I'd take offense to that, or you might think that I'd try and defend Fusion in some way, but actually, you know what? These people have a point. I do in fact think that Fusion is useless, and I'm not kidding. Asterisk. I mean, you knew the asterisk was coming, right? Like, I wasn't just about to completely disavow the project I've spent 2 years on. So, let me clarify what exactly I mean here. I think that for a large amount of people, Fusion is useless. That is to say that if they started using Fusion tomorrow, they would see no benefit from it whatsoever. They would be confused as to why anyone would want to use Fusion, and they would say, well, yeah, it's useless, it's rubbish. Why would you ever use this? It is equally true that there are a substantial number of people who do find value in Fusion and who do depend on it. Me included. I personally could not go back to life before Fusion. It works really, really well for me, and therefore I think it is perhaps even maximally useful. These two things are not mutually exclusive. One man's trash is another man's treasure. And I think there's actually a really interesting point to dig into here, and it's something I've wanted to talk about for a while, and it's about what I'm going to call best practice culture. And essentially, this is the culture that is especially prevalent on Roblox, but is also existent within the rest of computer science, where people from up high will just hand out these list of best practices that good developers follow because it's the right thing to do, without really establishing what problems are being solved or who exactly will find benefit from these different best practices, or what even the point is in general. It's just kind of, do this and your code is magically going to be perfect and you don't have to use your brain, which is kind of the wrong way to go about software development. Something I've always maintained for a long time is that it is your responsibility as the software developer to find the right solution to the problem. Any old fool can come up with a solution that just about works, but the best software engineers are the people who take a problem and they find the perfect, or at least a really good solution to it. They properly break it down, they figure out what's required of the problem, they model it properly, and then they look at all of the different available technologies and they choose the one that works. That's what good software engineers do. Bad software engineers are the ones that use Java for everything, because Java. And that's not just me being sarcastic or salty about the fact that Java sucks. That's literally just best practice culture, right? Why would somebody use Java? Well, it's because business uses Java, right? You used Java before. You're going to use Java now. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. I am, of course, blatantly ignoring the entire backwards compatibility story. Let's just forget that backwards compatibility exists for a second. We're talking about new greenfield development, new software. Why would you ever use Java? Just why? It doesn't solve any real problems. And I mean, unless your problems are intricately, highly complicated object-oriented programs, perhaps it does. But at this point, there are so many better programming languages for modeling that kind of stuff than Java. The only people who use Java are the people who are being told that this is the right thing to do. So it will be students coming out of university, because Java is used in industry, despite the fact that many industrial employment roles now look for other programming languages like Python. And you'll see business people who don't really know much about programming who say, well, the marketing tells us that Java runs everywhere and that Java is established and that everyone uses Java, therefore we must use Java. But if you actually talk to a software engineer, they're never going to recommend you use Java for anything. I haven't heard a recommendation for anyone to use Java in literally years. Nowadays, they're going to say, well, consider what your needs are. Do you need raw performance? Do you need low-level access? If so, then you should be looking at C, C++, or Rust. Or do you need something that's easy to maintain? Well, maybe you should be looking at Python or maybe TypeScript, perhaps even Go, right? What do you need? And based on your needs, propose a solution. That's the right way of doing it. You don't need best practices for that. There is no best practice. There are only solutions to problems you have. And this is why best practice culture sucks. And to bring this back around to Roblox, this happens on Roblox too, perhaps most infamously, and kind of related to my point before, object-oriented programming. The amount of people, especially at the more technical levels of development, who I have heard complain about object-oriented programming miss the point completely. They say, well, if you take a look at object-oriented programming, look at all these things that it functionally doesn't do. It doesn't encapsulate. It does polymorphism bad. It does XYZ bad. That's all true, and I'm not going to deny that, but that's not the real problem. No, nobody who is using object-oriented programming right now is going to write an essay about how they like the way it encapsulates state, because that's not why people are using object-oriented programming. They're using object-oriented programming because somebody else told them it was a good idea and that they should be using it for everything. That is not to say object-oriented programming is useless, it's just that for the vast majority of people, they're not using it to solve a real problem. They're using it because they were told to, that it's a best practice, and that's what the good developers do. This is false. And Fusion is kind of undergoing the same thing at the moment. I feel like there are a lot of people who have decided to use Fusion not because they have a specific problem that Fusion solves, but because it's the right thing to do, because it's a best practice. That doesn't exist, right? If you don't have a problem that Fusion solves, you shouldn't be using Fusion, because Fusion isn't going to be the answer to your problems. That being said, if you do have a problem that Fusion is designed to solve, go for it, because Fusion is probably going to be a really good answer for you. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is this. We need to put an end to best practice culture. There is no such thing as the best practice that you should always follow. The best practice you should always follow, in fact, I would argue, is figure it out yourself. You're a software engineer. This is your job. If you're not looking at the problem and finding a good fit solution, you suck at programming. And that's simply the long and short of it. You might stumble into the correct technology by sheer chance, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to build something that you regret building later, which means you've done a bad job. Because the end goal of software engineering is not to do the right thing or to follow the best practices, it's to solve the right problem with the right solution. Fundamentally, if you're not doing that, you're not doing a good job. And that's why best practices suck, and that's why, for a large number of people, Fusion is completely useless, and that's why I don't have a problem with that reality. Anyway, I've been Dan, and I will see you guys next time. Have fun!